I am going to talk about how I edit panoramas, especially those taken at sunrise and sunset. I start off in Adobe Bridge. I select the first image of this 9-image horizontal panorama, hold down the Shift key and choose the last image. That selects all of them, and I right click and do Open in Camera Raw. This opens all the images in Adobe Camera Raw. Once I'm in RAW, I will initially work with only the first image. The first thing I do to any image is apply a preset to it. I have given a handout, or I have supplied a handout that has information on how to create your own presets, especially the ones that I'm going to use here. So in this case, being the picture was taken at sunset, I am going to use a basic sunset preset. Once I've applied the preset, I'm going to go back into the Edit menu at the top here, and I'm going to work on different sliders in this menu. Being that this image is on the dark side, I am going to increase exposure to about there. Now, this increase is subjective. I'm looking at the image on the screen, and that's how I make my decision where to stop. All right, once I've done this, and you may not have to do this in every panorama that you take, especially at sunset and sunrise, but in some you will, and that's fine. The next two steps are ones that you should do with every image that you open up in Adobe Camera Raw. And that is go down to the black slider here and click on it, and then push down the alternate key on your keyboard. You'll see these dark areas on the screen, and that's where clipping is going to take place in the dark areas of your image. That means that there's not really going to be any data there. So to try to minimize that, we're going to take our slider and slide it to the right until as much of the dark area as we can get goes away. The next thing we want to do is go to the white slider, click on that, hold down the alternate key, and you will see all these red areas where there's going to be clipping in the highlights of the image. So we want to take our slider and slide it to the left. There we go. I went all the way, and it didn't take away all of it, but it did a pretty good job and got rid of most of it. At this point, sometimes the image is a little flatter than I'd like it. Now there's two ways you can add to that. You can either use contrast, or being that this is an aerial image, I like to use dehaze. So I'm just going to slide that up to around 18. And again, this becomes subjective. So once I've done that, now what I would like to do is apply the settings that I used on this one image to the other 8 images in the sequence. So to do that, you right click on the first image and choose Select All. Right click on that same image again and do Sync Settings. You'll get this synchronized box come up, and you basically can just accept all the default settings and click OK. And when I do that, watch what happens to the images at the bottom of the screen. You can see the settings that I applied to that first image are applied to all the rest. Typically in sunrise and sunset pictures, there's going to be, especially in the 9-image panorama, there'll be 3 images that will be darker than the others, and those will be the images where the gimbal is pointed to its lowest point in all 3 columns, and typically it's image 3, image 4, and image 9. So I'm going to click on image 3, hold the Control key, click on image 4, hold the Control, keeping the Control key down, I'm going to click on image 9. So now I've selected these 3 images, and I'm going to add exposure to them so they're not as dark as they might be. So I'm going to slide this a little bit to the right, and I'm okay right there. Now what we'd like to do is save all of these images to an individual folder so that we can find them once we start the next part of our process. So I'm going to right click on any image and click on Select All. And if you go up here to the top of the screen, you'll see a little drop down arrow. It's a Convert and Saved Selected Images. drop down. So I'm going to click on that. And you'll get this dialog box up. Destination, I choose save in the same location. In this case, I'm going to select the folder. It happens to be the Droner's Panorama folder that I created. And under Panoramas, I'm going to pick folder 746 because this is the panorama that I'm working on. Double click on it. I need to create a new folder. You can give the folder any name, but just from an easy standpoint, I just typically call it 0 and then hit enter. And then I do enter again and do select. So now it's chosen this subfolder 0 to keep the files in. It's the same folder that the raw images are in, but it's one folder down. The next is I go about naming my image. Now you can type whatever name you want here in this box, and it will show you what it's going to look like when the image is finished. So I used Bayonne Sunset to show where I took the image, Pano because it's a panorama, and 746 because that is the folder number that this is coming out of. And then I add the date that I created the image. I save it as a TIFF file. And here is where it says TIFF. And I do Adobe RGB 1998, which is the color space that I use. I could do this in 16-bit images, but 8 works just fine for me. So at this point, I'm going to click on Save. And the program will go about saving the images back into Adobe Bridge. Now it's time to stitch our images together. We are going to actually do this 3 different ways using 3 different programs. The first program that we're going to use will be Adobe Photoshop. So we want to select our first image, hold the Shift key down, select our last image, and then go to Tools, Photoshop, Photo Merge. This dialog box will come up and you can use the default. I've tried it in a few other things like perspective and it comes out the same way. So we're just going to do OK. And what you're going to find out that this is not exactly a very fast process. It takes some time for the panorama to stitch. And because it takes some time, I am at one point going to cut out part of this. Well, this is how Adobe Photoshop treated the image, and honestly, it looks pretty bad to me. But we're going to see what we can do to salvage it as best we can. I'm going to start cropping. I'm going to pull down the top, but I really want to keep more of the sky in, so I'll show you how we can fill it in a little bit. So I'm going to crop the sides, crop the bottom, leave some of the water so we can get the glow from the sunset on the water, and then double click to accept the crop. And then I'm going to do View, Fit on Screen. And one of the things you'll notice, especially after we do the next program to create the panorama, if you look to the right here, this roadway is straight and flat, and really it shouldn't be. It should be more like the roadway on this side as it comes up and continues to elevate till it reaches the center of the bridge. But for now, you know, we have what we have. So our next issue is how are we going to fill this in? So I'm going to take the magic wand tool and I'm going to, actually I can't do that. If you look on the right here, you can see that this image is a bunch of different layers that have been put together but not merged into a single layer. And until I merge these into a single layer, I won't be able to do very much with the image. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go into Layer, Flatten Image, and if you look, they'll all flatten down to a single image. Okay, well, this is good. Now when I use the magic wand tool here, I click in it, and it selects the blank space. I want to do edit, fill, and I want to use content aware, color adaptation is checked, normal and 100% opacity, and do OK. Now, content aware fill works really good. One of the issues with it is that sometimes you'll see a line where it has filled in, and it hasn't done this in this particular image. But to avoid that, I'm going to go backwards, and instead of using the magic wand tool, I'm going to use this little lasso tool, and I'm going to actually create the area that I want filled just outside the blank area. Now when I do edit, fill, content aware, it will basically do the same thing that it did for me with the magic wand tool. But if you experience an issue with a line in your image, try doing it this way instead. Now I'll do deselect, and you can see it looks pretty good. So I've got the sky that I want, I got my sunset, and I got the reflection on the water. Well, now we're going to go to program number 2 to accomplish the same thing. So we're going to use a program called PT-GUI. Not inexpensive, but it works really great. So the first thing I'm going to do is load images. So I'm going to load the same images that I loaded into Photoshop. And I'm going to do open. Once the images are open, I am going to do align images. And you can see it's considerably faster than Photoshop. Now you can see here how the bridge now slopes down the way it's supposed to. In the Photoshop image, it kind of just stretched things out, and it made the bridge look smaller in the panorama. Now, there are some things that you can do within this program before you export things. I can see here that the horizon maybe could use a little bit of dropping to the right side. So if you go outside the image and right click, you can pull down and you can make the edge go up or down. And then I think in the middle I want to pull it down a little bit because it's a little bit humped in the middle, so I'm going to pull it down there. Now you can use the grid lines in this program to help you make sure that things are aligned the way you want. I could then go ahead and crop this program, this image, right in PT-GUI, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go back to the main interface and I'm going to do create panorama. Now I want it as a TIFF. I want it saved in the same folder that the images came from. I want a blended panorama. I want to use my Adobe RGB color space, and it will actually pick the color space for you if you have this box checked. Now I'm going to do create panorama. And we're going to go into Adobe Bridge, and we will find the created panorama in the same folder as the TIFF files that we used to create it. So I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to crop this. Again, I want to leave a fair amount of sky in. I don't need a lot of water. I'm going to go to the side here and go to the side here and come up a little bit on the sky. All right, I like it right there. Double click, and then I'm going to do view, fit on screen. Now here are our two panoramas. This one was done by Photoshop. This one was done by PT-GUI. I think the PT-GUI stands head and shoulders above the Photoshop one. But now we're going to try a third program. This program is called Microsoft Image Composite Editor. It's a free program that you can find on the internet. And I am going to load in those same 9 images that we use. Now I make sure I don't want to grab this one because this was created by PT-GUI, but I'm going to grab the first one, hold the shift key, grab the next one, and do open. All right, these images are now opened in ICE. The next thing I want to do is click on box number 2 for stitch. This also works considerably faster than Photoshop. Not quite as fast as PT-GUI, but not bad. All right, so now we have our stitched together panorama, which I think is very close to what we've gotten from PT-GUI. I see that the horizon is still a little bit up on the right side as compared to the left side. So I'm going to see if we can maybe fix it. I don't know if it'll let me do this. I don't think. There we go. Use the right hand mouse button outside the area here and pull up or down to make that side of the image go up or down. So that's great. That's what I want. Now we're going to go to crop. All right, now we go and use the crop tool just like we did in Photoshop. Go here and here. And come down a little bit more, like right there. And I'm going to come out. You know, I like that the way it is. So we're going to leave it just like that. Then we'll go to export. There's our cropped image. We can pick how we want the file saved. I want to save it as a TIFF file. And I don't care about the alpha channel. I don't really need to hold on to that. But I'm going to export it to disk. And I'm going to save the default name, and I'm going to choose save. Now I'm going to go back into Bridge, and I'm going to find the stitch file, double click it, and now we have, I'm going to do image or view fit on screen, and we have our ICE image, our PT-GUI image, and our Photoshop image. And I would say that the PT-GUI and the ICE image are basically identical except for how they were cropped. So there you have it. 3 different ways of creating a panorama. I personally like PT-GUI, but all right, I did find a flaw here, which is rather interesting. Let's look here at the stitch panorama. And let's look right here. I'm going to go in and zoom in on this. If you look right here, the bridge is not lined up perfectly. It's actually, this section needs to come up to line up right here. If we go into the PT-GUI one and zoom in, you'll see that the alignment is perfect in the same location. So in this case, I've got to give the edge to PT-GUI. And now you have choices to decide which is best for you. Feelings in this particular image is that it needs a little bit more pop to it. And one way to do that is to add contrast to the image. I'm going to open up brightness and contrast. And I'm going to give it some contrast. And watch the sky change. And the clouds get a little darker. And I mean, you can go to one extreme like that, but I don't want to go that far. I'm going to say maybe somewhere in here. And here you can use the preview button or box to see the difference. And honestly, at this point, I would be fine with that. I think the only thing that I would do at this point is to sharpen the image. And I have something called a high pass filter. And I can supply anybody with this action that wants it. And what it does is it just sharpens the edges. So I'm going to apply that filter. And there we have it. We have the finished panorama. So all that's left to do is to save it and whatever file name that you want, and whatever folder that you want. But I'm going to go back before I added contrast to it, and I'm going to open up a program called Luminar AI. I really like the program, and I've used it quite often to make changes to my images. And the program comes with some built-in templates, and I've gotten other templates from being a member. Every month or so they give me some free templates. So I have things here like ultimate landscapes, and you can go into this and you can try different templates to see how it looks and see if it meets your particular desire. So I'm going to try sunrise. That's a little too bright for me, and up here there's a little eyeball that you can preview on and off. That doesn't work. Now we have golden hour. Again, too bright for me. We can try dreamy. And this isn't bad, but what it does is it puts a vignette around the entire picture, which I don't care for much. But you can also go into edit up here at the top, and you can go to vignette, and you can turn it off. So now you get a better idea of what that particular template did. So I'm going to go on and off. Still a little too bright for me down in the dark areas here. I'm going to do the landscape balance. Now it's a little too dark and oversaturated. We'll go to landscape moody. And this one's not so bad. I think I could live with that. So once you find something that appeals to you, then what you're left with is to apply the template. Now that we're happy with the way the image looks, we're just going to click apply, and the program will take all of the changes that we've made to it and apply it to the finished image. And there we have our finished image after using Luminar. And if you look at the history, you can see the difference before, after. I like it. So there you have some options on what to do with your image once you have stitched your panorama together. I am going to show you another panorama that I stitched manually. And I did it manually because I did not want a very low part of the panorama included in the panorama. So I shot my first image at maybe +15, shot my second one at -5, my third one I moved over at -5 again, and then I went up to +15, shot that one, moved over again and shot +15, went down to -5 and shot another one, and then moved over. So I did this for 16 images, and I'm going to show you why I did. I'm going to click on the first image, hold the shift key, click on the last image, and I'm going to open them in Adobe Camera Raw. It's going to ask if I want to open 16 files, and I'm going to say OK. Now the reason I have 16 files is because I only use 2 files per column, and I shot 8 columns, so I would end up with 16 files. So first thing, I'm going to take the first image, I'm going to go into my templates or my presets, and I'm going to choose Sunset Basic. Then go back up, choose my edit module. I am going to hold down the Alt key, grab the black slider, and slide to the right till I get rid of the clipping black dark areas. I'm going to do the same thing with the white to get rid of the clipped highlights or the red areas there. And at this point I'm going to add a little bit of dehaze just to get a little more contrast back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this image and do select all. And then I am going to right click again and do sync settings and do OK. And what you're going to see is that there are no dark images in this particular sequence because I eliminated the very low gimbal setting. Now we need to save our images. So I'm going to go up here to the Convert and Save Selected Images box, click on it. I'm going to select a folder, and I'm going to go to Panoramas 0056. I'm going to create a new folder, call it 0, hit enter twice, and do select. And I'm going to change the name now to Brick Sunset. The panel number is 056. And I shot this on January 9th of 22. All right, everything else is the way I want it to be, and I'm just going to click Save. We're going to open Adobe Bridge. We're going to go to the 0 folder, select the first image, hold the Shift key down and select the last one, and do Tools, Photoshop, Photo Merge. All right, now we come up to our automatic selection, do OK. And I have to say that Photoshop actually did a pretty nice job on this panorama. So we're going to crop it a little bit here, crop it here, crop it here, and crop it there. Maybe come up a little bit, get a little more sky in. All right, I'm going to crop it, and I'm going to do View, Fit on Screen. All right, we're not going to do anything more to this right now. Now what we're going to do is open up PT-GUI and open those same images and see how it does. Panoramas 56, 0, click the first, hold the Shift key, kick the last, and then open. All right, now we're going to do Align Images. All right, now to take care of this, and I don't know why it ends up being like this, just take your left mouse button and drag it across till the whole image is in the file. But by moving the mouse button up or down, it kind of changes the waviness of the horizon. So I get that close to where I want, and then I'll use the right mouse button and I'll bring the side down, and then maybe bring up the middle a little bit. So that's pretty close. And what I'm going to do at this point is I am going to go back to the main menu of PT-GUI and do Create Panorama. Click on Create Panorama. It'll create it in the same folder as we had it before, as the TIFF images were in. And once it's complete, we'll go into Bridge. We'll open up that file. We'll crop it. I'm just going to do a rough crop now because I want to see more of the image before I finish up. So I'm just going to go like this to start. And then I'm going to do View, Fit on Screen. And then I'm going to finish cropping. So I want to go here. I'd really like to get more of this in. Now, there's two ways I can do this. I can either come up to here, double click, choose my magic wand tool, click here, hold the Shift key to add to the selection and click here. And you see too, though, I've had some little bit of areas in the corners I'll take care of separately. So I'm going to do Edit Fill, Content Aware, filled it in very nicely. I'm going to go Select, Deselect, and then I'm just going to take the Spot Healing Brush tool and I'm just going to drag it in these corners, and you'll see it fills things in very nicely. All right, so now we have our image from Photoshop stitching, our image from PT-GUI stitched. And I'd say they're both comparable. Now we're going to take the image processing program and we're going to go back here to Import. Discard that project. We're going to get new images. We're going to go to 056. We're going to leave out that first image. Grab the other 16, do Open, do Stitch. All right, we have a finished panorama, and I was going to say it looks real good, but if you look right here, the horizon does not match. We could try to fix that in Photoshop, but it can really be a big PIA. But in any case, let's go to crop. And I mean, you have choices. You can do well, auto crop, that's what it would crop it at, which is fine. Let's take that. And then we'll go to export, and we'll do export as a TIFF, export to disk. We're going to pick the same folder it came from, do save. Go into Adobe Bridge, look for our stitch file, which is right here. Do view, fit on screen, and you can see right here where you see a seam and the horizon doesn't match. So again, in this case, I give equal ratings to Photoshop and to PT-GUI. I would use either one of those in this particular case. Now it's time to do the final editing on our panorama. There are a couple ways that you can deal with this. You can do your editing in Photoshop. With an image like this, I probably would try increasing the shadows and not changing the highlights. So I'm going to use shadow and highlights. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to not increase the highlights at all, but I'm going to start to move the shadows up. And I'm using my up arrow key on the keyboard to move it up 1% at a time. And when I think I'm where I'd like to be, I'm going to use the preview checkbox and turn it on and off to see if I like the way it is. And honestly, maybe I go down a little bit from here. Maybe we'll keep it at around 10%. And that looks pretty good. Now at this point, I could just accept that, sharpen the image, and be done with it. But we're also going to look at another option, and that is to use Luminar AI. So I'm going to open up the image in Luminar. And this time I'm going to take a first look at the sunset template. So I'll click on that, and I'm going to try impact and see what it does to this image. Well, it certainly enhances it. Here's before, here's after. And honestly, that's not a bad end result. I don't think I would call it oversaturated. It tended to raise the highlights, but also add more of the rose color into the sky. Now, we could look other ones. I mean, Hyperdrive I think is going to be over the top, but we can look at it anyway. Yeah, I think that's a little too over the top. Dream Film, that's it doesn't work for me at all. So I'm going to try another template. I'm going to go back to one that we tried yesterday, and that was my unique landscapes. So let's try and look at what Moody would look like. And honestly, I like this so far the best. It hasn't added much to the sky. It's made maybe the rose color a little brighter, but it's added to the shadows, and I think it works. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to choose Apply to apply the template. And now it will take any changes that we made and put them into the finished image in Photoshop. And that's it for this section. I am going to take and process a 21 image panorama taken at sunset in Brick, New Jersey. I'll click on the first image, hold down the Shift key, click on the last image, right click, and choose Open in Camera Raw. Now that we're in Camera Raw, we're going to work with the first image. So being this was sunset, I'm going to go into my presets. I'm going to pick Sunset Basic. Go back into the Edit menu, and it's rather bright, so I think I'm going to actually take the exposure and bring it down a little. Then I'm going to go and hold the alternate key down and grab the black slider and get rid of the dark areas that are clipped. Do the same thing with the white slider and get as much of the highlights that are clipped out as possible. Now I'm going to apply just a little bit of dehaze to this, and I'm going to right click on that first image, do Select All, and then I'm going to do Sync Settings, and there we have it. Now you're going to see that in a 21 inch panorama there are many more images that are darker, and these are all the bottom row of each one of the columns, and in this case there's 7 columns and each column has 3 rows. So I'm going to click on the first image that's darker, hold down the Control key, click the second, and then go over here and click this one, and probably the next 2, because they're out on the edges of the panorama, so they're darker. I'm going to grab this one, and this one, and this one. Now, this is really subjective. You know, I could have grabbed a couple of more, but I'm going to just do those. I'm going to add a little bit of exposure to them, and I'm going to leave it at that. So now I want to save all of these images. So I'll right click on any of the images, do Select All. I'll go up here to our Convert and Save Selected Images drop down. I will choose the directory, which is going to be Droners, Panoramas, 0080. Create a new folder, called 0, hit Enter, and Enter again, and then choose Select. Now I'm going to change this. The pano number is 080, so I'll change that to 80. It is a brick sunset, but it was taken on January 12th, so I'll change the 9 to a 12. Everything else is where I want it to be, so I'm just going to do save. Now Photoshop will go and save those 21 images to our subfolder named 0. Now that all the images are saved, we're going to choose Done here at the bottom. We're going to go into Adobe Bridge, go into our old folder, and we're going to do the same thing we've done in the past. We're going to process these images in 3 different manners. First one will be in Photoshop. So we'll click the first image, hold the Shift key, click the last image, and go up to Tools, Photoshop, Photo Merge. We'll choose the default layout of auto and twiddle our thumbs while Photoshop goes about making this panorama. So here is our finished panorama in Photoshop, and it actually did a pretty good job at it. So now we're going to go ahead and crop this. I want to keep some of these things in the sky, these whiffs of clouds in the sky. I may just come up a little bit here and we'll fix this, or we'll just crop in from that side. I also want to keep the reflections of the clouds in the water, so I can crop in pretty good from each side so that I can still keep my clouds in the picture. So this looks pretty good to me, so I am going to double click to complete the crop. And then what I'm going to do, if you look here, we've got all these layers here. So I'm going to do Layer, Flatten Image, and then I'm going to do View, Fit on Screen. All right. Now that we've done this with Photoshop, we are going to go into PT-GUI and do the same panorama in PT-GUI. So we'll go to our Droners Panorama, Panoramas, Panorama 80, the 0 folder, select the first image, hold down the Shift key and select the last, do Open. All right, PT-GUI will load all of the 21 images in, and then we will click on Align Images. All right, again, kind of runs off the side of the screen, but just use your left mouse button somewhere on the outside of the panorama and just drag it along. And by moving the mouse button up and down, it kind of changes the horizon. Well, I got it now where it's straight. And this has done also a really nice job on the panorama. So I'm going to go back to the main screen of the PT-GUI, and I'm going to click on Create Panorama, and then click Create Panorama again, and it will create the panorama in the same folder that the TIFF images were that we used to stitch together. Once this is complete stitching the panorama, I'll go into Adobe Bridge. We'll find our panorama right here, first image on the left, Double click, bring it in Photoshop, and I'm going to crop it. And I want to accomplish the same things in this crop. I want to keep the clouds up in the top. I want to keep the reflection in the water. And I can lose a little on the sides if it helps me with what I want to accomplish with the clouds. In this case, I'm going to come up just a little bit here so I can get a little more of the cloud in. I'm going to double click to accept the crop. I'm going to do View, Fit on Screen. Then I'm going to take the Magic Wand tool, click in the area that's blank. It won't let me do that because it's showing as layer 0. So I'm going to first do layer, flatten image, and then I'll go click the Magic Wand tool, click in there, and then I'm going to do Edit Fill, Content Aware, and it filled it. Now there's still a little tiny piece here, and it's too small to deal with the Magic Wand, so I'm going to grab the Spot Healing brush and just go up here and brush over that white area. Oh, I have to first deselect the area over here. So you can do select, deselect, and now go over here and do this. Okay, so now we have two images, one done by Photoshop and one done by PT-GUI. They're very, very similar. I think the one in Photoshop I might have cropped a little bit more than this one in PT-GUI, but they both look good. So now we're going to go to Microsoft Image Composite Editor. We're going to load in the same images that we just used. Panorama 080. We're going to not put in the first image, which is the completed panorama from PT-GUI. We clicked on the second image, held down the Shift key and clicked on the last image and did open. So now we're going to ask Microsoft Ice to align these images and stitch them together. Looking at all three programs, without a doubt, PT-GUI is the quickest. Microsoft Ice is a close second, and Photoshop is running way back in the back. All right, here is our completed panorama in Microsoft Ice, and again, if I look right here, it's not aligned correctly. The horizon right here comes across nice and straight, and then it goes up here. And so that has been a disappointment so far in what I've seen. I mean, it's so small that in the grand scheme of things, you may not see it. But let's try auto crop, see what it gives us. And then we're going to accept that. Go to next. And then we are going to export the image to disk. I want to export it as a TIFF file. I'm not going to include an alpha channel. Export it to disk to the same folder that we started with. So I'll do save. Now I'm not going to save the changes, but I'm going to go back to our Adobe Bridge folder, and we're going to look for our stitch file, which is down here. Double click it to open it in Photoshop, and do View, Fit on Screen. So now we have our three images. Now I'm going to zoom in on this stitch image to see if in fact the horizon is okay. And you can see right here again, I'll go in a little further. There is our boo-boo right there. So although Microsoft Ice has stitched things together successfully, and in a lot of cases nobody would pick this up, especially if you're viewing it on a phone or on a tablet. but on a full screen on a computer like this, I can see it. So those are the three choices. ICE is a free editor. Photoshop, if you're using Photoshop, it comes with Photoshop as part of Photoshop. And PT-GUI is my favorite, but I do a lot of panoramas, so I've been overall happier with that than anything else. Next, what we'd like to do is do the final editing on the panorama. And for that, in this situation, I'm going to take the PT-GUI one, mainly because I like where I've gotten more of the clouds over on the left-hand side. Now, you really don't have to do very much to this. This is is acceptable the way it is. But I'd like to run it through Luminar AI and just see what possibilities I have there to really make the image pop even a little more. So I'm going to start with sunsets again and start with impact. And I like that. I like the way it brought more reflection into the water. Here's a before, here's an after. Not overly saturated. It made some of the dark areas darker. Some of the light areas now stand out more because the blue of the sky has been made darker. And for me, this would work. But while we're here, let's look at a couple other things. We'll go back into my other templates, go into my ultimate landscapes, and we can try things like landscape golden hour. And really, that's almost, it's made changes, but for me, it's made it brighter than I'd like to see. So if we try dreamy landscape, this will put a vignette on it. I can get rid of the vignette, but looking at before and after, it's very similar to what we did with impact. Now, if you like the vignette, that's fine. If you don't, you can just go into the edit module up on top. Look for vignette, click on it, and just turn it off. All right, so now we have, go back to templates, we'll look at before and after. I like this too, and maybe I like this maybe a little bit more than impact because maybe it hasn't made the sky that much darker. So I'm going to accept this, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do apply to apply it to the image in Photoshop. And once we're in there, we'll look at our before and after image. So there we have it. Look at the history button. This is before Luminar and after Luminar, and I think it's way, way better after Luminar. So that's it. I've showed you how to process 9-image horizontal panoramas and 21-image 180-degree panoramas taken right around sunrise or sunset. I've shown you 3 different imaging programs to stitch these together, and now it's up to you to go from there. Thanks very much.